My name is Jim Collison. I want to welcome you to this time that we are together. I am the CliftonStrengths Community Manager for Gallup, and I'm here with Danny Lee, and we are excited to be with you today. Danny, welcome to the program.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Jim.
Yeah, it's always great to be with you. It's always a privilege to have this time. You are busy. You travel for Gallup a lot, and you go all kinds of different places around the world. But today you're with me, so it's pretty great to have you one on one. Thanks. As,
It
as,
is
as
a
we're
pleasure. Yeah.
as we're talking about teamwork today, I think no better place for me to be here than with you. Let's get to know you a little bit. For folks who are joining us here, throw your top five in chat if you'd like to do that. Let us know where you're listening from. We'd like to do all of that. But Danny, let's do a version for you of that. Tell us who you are, what you do for Gallup, and your top five.
Sure. My name is Danny Lee, and I've been with Gallup for now 17 years, and I've been in the leadership development space for during that time. And also, my top five is individualization, empathy, connectedness, harmony, developer. And so I tell people all my top five are relationship building. It also means that I'm the nicest guy they'll ever meet.
It's true, though.
And
It's true.
yeah, also, I'm also a strengths coach and have been developing other strengths coaches in the past decade now, trained about over 4,000 strengths coaches around the world. And I love my global nature of work. Worked in 21 different countries, and also just recently came back from foreign land.
Yeah, that's great. You and I have the opposite jobs. I stay in one place and do global work via YouTube or LinkedIn or whatever. And you go to those places and then from time to time get to join us here. Like I said, it's always a privilege to have you on. Let's ask this question of the chat. They're doing a great job of checking in. So again, you can put your top five in chat. Let us know where you're listening from. But a question I'm going to ask you, Danny, and I want
Mhm.
to ask everybody to drop in chat, and we'll respond to that as well, is what does a positive work culture look like, right? The title of this
Mhm.
time together is called Fostering Teamwork with Clifton Strengths. And a big part of that is a positive work culture. So, what does a
Mhm.
positive culture look like? Danny, in your work, because you've done both coaching, training, and some work in organizations, how would you answer that question? What does a positive culture look like?
Yeah, well, one thing I've learned from the golden circle from Simon Sinek is start with the why, not the what. And so let's start there. Like, why positive culture? And we can also narrow down to why culture. Like, what about that is important? I think culture is like a behavioral ecosystem. Just like we have habits, and the habits that we have, whether we have a habit of eating healthy or working out, or even habit of thinking positively, or habit of looking for opportunities, or habit of overcoming fear, or habit of just kind of self-programming that, I deserve this or I am worthy. Those little habits, it actually has a huge influence over a person's future, and culture is nothing but a collective of those individual habits in an organizational setting. So, depending on what kind of culture a team or an organization has, their initiatives and efforts, it can be either like swimming against the current, or if you have the right culture, it's like swimming with the current. So when we have the right, that's why when we in business we use the word culture eats strategy for breakfast. No matter how big of a strategy and vision and mission one has, if the culture doesn't support, it can either enable the growth. It can also massively underline it. Culture is also like autopilot,
Mm,
where we have habits, and those habits we kind of put it on autopilot. So if we're on an autopilot of thinking creatively, or we're on an autopilot of journaling every day, that influences our future being and results.
mm,
And that also, that what kind of autopilot are we on when we go to work, when we engage with each other? That also creates certain a very strong influence actually over the outcomes and the things that they can achieve. So that's why culture itself is important. And then we can think about what a positive culture might look like versus a negative culture. A positive culture, it's one word, but it can actually mean very different things depending on the industry, depending on the management philosophy, or even the gathering. To some people, positive work culture means staying really focused, efficient, and getting things done. To other people, a positive work culture might be not just about work, but there's a lot of celebration and fun to it. So positive culture can mean and look very differently. But I think when it comes to positive culture, it's not the perfect version of there is absolutely no mistrust, or there is no absolutely no backstabbing, or there is absolutely um, no fear. I think a positive work culture still has those elements, but the frequency wise, we see just more higher frequency of recognizing excellence, higher frequency of having a safe space to express themselves and innovative ideas. I think a positive work culture, we just see a lot more of trusted behavior. We see a lot more result orientation and proactiveness rather versus a average work culture or a negative work culture will have a lot less of that in frequency. So um, I think in essence, a positive working culture is it's not just a working culture, but it's also a living space as well, where
Mm,
people feel that they can express their talents, express their strengths, and be able to achieve meaningful things that give a fulfillment, both from an organizational performance point of view, but also from a personal point of view. If you ask me one word that comes to mind, positive work culture is the culture stimulating growth? Is it encouraging growth
mm,
of the team, of the organization, or of the individual, or is it undermining it?
mm.
So that's how we can probably kick off this topic of positive work culture.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's a great preamble into this. We'll remind those listening live if they, I'd love, we do this exercise in Gallup town halls all the time where we say,
Mm,
put one word, or you can use two, it's fine. But as you think about a positive work culture, the results of that are represented in what way? Put a couple words in chat. How have you seen it? I love there has been a few comments already.
mm,
We'll read those. But Michelle says this team members align around goals and are encouraged to bring their best talents to work. Doesn't mean there aren't challenges. And I think sometimes we can go get a little off base on this when we think when there's challenges or accountability or disagreements that's breaking down the positive work culture. But she says, but we get through them together and perhaps even stronger. And then John said a little bit earlier, he prefers to use the word community versus culture. Danny,
mm.
would you add to that or respond to that in any way?
Yeah,
Those comments?
I'm very much aligned to that. A positive work culture is not, sometimes we use these extremes, like we use these extreme words in business where we say, what's the best possible outcome? What is the best practice? We got to make sure we don't, drop any balls or there's any gaps, or we got to be 100%, 120%. I think we're human beings. We're human beings, and teams are a group of human beings. So, a positive work culture is not the absence of the conflict. It's not the absence of the challenges. They are present. But a positive work culture, there's more higher probability of seeing behaviors that enables us to wisely optimize those challenges or better efficiently overcome those challenges or resolve those conflicts.
I love there's some great comments coming in. We've been showing them on screen in chat. Just these words, confidence, fun in the teamwork, positive work
Mm,
community, supportive of various cultures. So some great feedback on that. Danny, I often say Clifton Strengths is an accelerant for team formations and sustainability, right? When we
mhm,
think about that framework, these 34 themes, as we figure out who we are in that, we can more quickly draw some conclusions about the teams,
Mm-hmm.
figure out how we work best together, and then maybe shore up some of those areas where we don't. Talk a little bit more. How can we use Clifton Strengths to kind of continue to foster that collaborative environment? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how can we continue to use that in a way that creates these positive work cultures?
Yeah. Well, frequency matters. When we're creating a culture is not about this one-time big event or two-day workshop. Those are important, but those are like going to the dentist. It's we need that, but it's a one-time event. But what really builds the culture and builds the habit is what happens after the dental visit. Do we brush our teeth? Do we floss and things like that? So how do we continue to use it is really it's in that word continue. It's that frequency. How do we use it on a day-to-day basis, and not just in a classroom or a workshop or in a big presentation, but when we go back to our day-to-day deadlines and daily demands and team collaborations and meetings. The fact is human beings are very complex. Jim, you're very complex. I'm complex. Everyone attending this live session is very, very complex, and teams are complex too. It's a gathering of very, very complex human beings. But sometimes because we are the same species, we feel like we know them and we are similar, but we're very different statistically. One in 34 million. We're all very, very unique. So when there's complex human beings come together, there's bound to be misunderstanding and conflicts because we're misinformed. And there's a lot of expectation that for people to be mind readers, and we assume a lot. So in that ball of complexity, the Clifton Strength gives a very scientific way to start unpacking that complexity by starting from a place of simplicity. We help people understand, just like, I got two hands, but of the two hands, one is more dominant. Similar to that, we all have these 34 areas of geniuses, but we don't have them equally. There are the ones that surface to the top that is more like our somebody's dominant hand or like my dominant hand. It yields more higher return on investment. It tends to uh, yield more higher probability of success. So when we understand these and put these into uh, practice, so I would say there's a stage of awareness, and then there's a stage of not just stopping at the awareness and hooray, we know our top five, but then go into the application. So awareness to application. And then we apply. And then we start applying it selectively towards our aspirations. So I just came up with it. Maybe we'll just call it the triple A's: the awareness, the application, towards the aspiration. But um, it's not about this silver bullet that will solve every single problem within the team, but it is a very powerful and practical way to optimize
Mm,
a gathering of complex human beings.
mm.
So we start small, and then we just continuously using it in our day-to-day operations, in our day-to-day meetings and conversations.
Let's make an assumption that a
Mm,
team has their top 5. They've got a grid with the top 5 on it, or they know it, they're aware of them, right? They've got these. From a manager standpoint, or even from from a group standpoint, what are some real practical things a team, once they're aware of these, right? They begin to have these
mhm,
discussions and they know them, they can identify them in others, some of those kinds of things. What are some practical things they can actually do to help in this area to develop a positive work culture, even if it's
mhm.
just at the team level?
Yeah, yeah. So when we have a great tool like the team grid, which is basically plotting the dominant talents or the superpowers that exist within the team by individuals, it's so easy to get sucked into that tool and try to analyze the tool. But I would say, as a leader, step back from the team grid and think about, what do we stand for as a team? What are our aspirations? What do we want to be known for as a team? What does a great team look like? And really define what excellence, performance and aspiration looks like. Even thinking about what does a great culture look like to us? What is my management philosophy? What does success look like for the team? So, from a more high level perspective, define excellence and aspiration, irrelevant to what the team grid actually says. So, we start there. And then, once we have those big pictures defined, then we go into okay, now what kind of talents and superpower do we have within this team that can enable us to get there closer, get there faster, get there with less friction, get there with higher level of efficiency. So starting with the almost like starting with the why conversation, but then taking it down to okay, now with the strengths that we have, how can we get there a little bit more easier, faster, in a way that's more authentic for the team? I think a really important question that leaders can start with this is instead of looking at what do we have, start asking the question, what's right about my team?
Mm,
What's right about my team? What's right about this team member? What makes them unique versus the other? Because the role of the leader is really like a master conductor of the orchestra. They're not playing the violin, they're not playing the piano, but they are actually identifying who plays what and what each is excellent looks like, and they're actually coordinating and organizing those, or in a way, channeling those efforts.
mm. I love what you were saying as I was thinking about what you said. This thing came to mind of I'm at the end of my day,
Mm,
and instead of sometimes you're like, oh, it's been a long day, of asking someone on the team, what did we do right today? Like what really worked today,
mhm,
instead of I just can't wait to get out of here. I just can't wait to get home. It just is one of those really practical, positive end. Sometimes, we start the day by getting together. Maybe some groups do stand ups and they're
mm,
like, hey, what I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? What are my roadblocks? But to finish the day, what do we
mhm.
really do well today as a team? Does it require the manager for the team culture to work, or can teams do this in spite of their manager, so to speak? And I say that in jest a little bit, but does it always have to be the manager that leads these things?
Not necessarily. I mean, there's just like engagement, there is a role of the manager, which is very important,
Mhm,
but there's also the role of the individual, the personal being, and then there's the role of the colleagues, and it all creates the ecosystem and the culture. But irrelevant to the team and the manager as a self, we can also do things. It's about like self-awareness. How can we become more self-aware? How can we optimize the talents that we have in our daily living? Because it's all different. It's all different. I, in my kind of talent DNA, the very dead last is achiever. So there's so many achievers in the world. Achiever is my very dead last. But for so long in my life, I have tried to live a life like an achiever
mm,
and try to evaluate my life as an achiever, like an achiever. And it just didn't work. I wasn't very happy because that wasn't necessarily what charged my batteries. So I lead with connectedness, and so to me, a good day for me is not necessarily how much I got done. My good day is it can look the same as an achiever, but it means differently. My good day would be um, how many seeds have I planted today for the future? Like it can be the same thing. I'm still working hard. Achievers are working. We're all working hard. But the way it generates meaning can be different how we are wired. So let's think about okay, we're closing out the day as an individual, just looking at our top five and see how each of those top five talents or strengths are has been charged.
Mm.
How do we keep it charged? And how do we use it more? Because um, eagle needs to fly. Um, they got wings, they got wide wings, and they have to flap those wings and fly to feel good about their being. And these top five kind of represents those. If those wings are tied and we put an eagle in a bird cage, the eagle will suffer, become sick, and eventually die. So the I think Elizabeth Gilbert, who is the author of Eat, Pray, Love, shared this in a podcast some years ago about her guru from India. And this is what um, she said that he said. And the quote will be messed up a little bit, but it goes something like this: a talent that's not used, when it's not used, it becomes illness. So
Mm.
when people have talent, we got to use those. A
Mm.
bird, an eagle needs to spread their wings and fly. So at the individual level, yes, there's things we can do at the team level, but at an individual level, it sometimes we can call it a different way of self-care. We have to take care of, be aware of, and also take care of our dominant talents that we possess.
Two comments from Chad, and I want you to kind of
Mhm.
respond to these. John says it's important to know that when we define our work culture, we do so only from our perspective, right? What you view and define as culture are not the same as everyone in that culture. Thinking
Yeah.
too, to right below it, then Michelle says, and to be sure, my maximizer can look a bit different than your maximizer. So let's talk about that and how mine might show up on a team and a project, etc., and especially as it relates to my other talents.
Hmm.
Danny, as you think about those two, I mean, I'm reading a lot of individualization with a small I, not the theme
Hmm.
of it, but the idea. Your thoughts on that, especially as we think about both of them relate to conflict in a team. What I see is not what you see. That's what both
Hmm.
of those say to me. How do we really work through those conflicts?
Yeah.
What are some practical ways of working through?
So the two words that comes to mind is communication versus assumption. Many times in team settings, we assume versus open up and communicate. So we might hear the word culture. We all know this word, but the way one person interprets and sees that word can be very different. And they're talking about culture, but they're actually talking about two very different things. Michelle's point about talent, absolutely correct, because it's not just the maximizer, but the other, what comes with the maximizer around, but not just the talent themes, but what comes with cultural backgrounds, philosophies, belief systems, aspirations, how they grew up, where they went to school, what they know, what their dreams are. All of that comes together. So one maximizer and another maximizer can be also very different, but through communication, not just as, oh, you got a maximizer, I got maximizer too. I understand what your maximizer is because I also has. Instead of that, communicate, have chance to communicate. And there's also a wonderful tool that many of us know. It's called the Best of Us. And even when we are creating a small project team and starting the project, just simply sharing our top five talents, also going through a quick version of the Best of Us, which starts with, you get the best of me when, get the worst of me when, this is what I need from you, and these are the things you can count on me to bring. That creates communication. It creates alignment, and it creates efficiency versus assuming. So I would say step a little bit more on the communication um, versus the assumption.
Mm. Love that. Yeah, let's not make the assumption, because I think sometimes we, much like when we get a text message,
Hmm.
we read it with negative intent. I think sometimes attitudes get displayed that way too, and we, instead of clarifying, we may start making assumptions, right?
Hmm.
And we all know where that goes. Can you think of, in all the, in the 17 years you've been out doing
Hmm.
this for us, some, have you witnessed this in a client? We don't have to name, we have to name
Mm,
names, but have you seen this in a client situation and it get resolved through them actively working through some of these things we've been talking about? Any
hmm.
examples there?
Yeah. So an example that comes to mind is we'll just call it a small company with employee size of like 10, 15, 10, 15. Um, wasn't very well known, and they were trying to kind of put their put their name on the industry map. They did possess a lot of great areas of strengths, not Clifton strengths, but strengths as a company, their offering, and the talents that they possessed. But the Clifton strengths itself gave them a actual tool to name it and be able to apply those and apply those into day to day. So even a simple activity, they created a little magnet board in the entrance where each day when people come, they actually get to pick one of their top 5 magnets and say, "This is what I'm going to focus on today."
Mm, mm,
So we can actually each member, not only does it create awareness of who has what kind of dominant talents, but it's like, okay, it's actually every day it's a building a habit. Okay, which one am I going to be intentionally using with my client call today? Which am I going to be paying attention to today? So it goes from awareness to application. It started building those habits and it started becoming an actual organic culture. And during COVID time, when competitors were actually closing business and shutting down, they actually not only met their organizational target, they actually doubled it. So
mm,
200%. Yeah, 200% accomplishment. Now it's been 2 years since that, 2, 3 years since that time. They are now 3 times the size that they used to be. And so when we are aware, and then not just aware and talk about it, but go towards practice applying even simple thing like these magnet things and applying and being intentional about it,
mm,
it does result in higher level of efficiency. um, is there conflict? Of course there is, but the way they resolve conflicts is a lot more efficient.
mm,
So it results in business growth, personal growth, and the outcome is actually pretty good. And it actually applies at the individual level as well. I was coaching a sales exec, which early in the year, basically number was really low for the entire country operation. And then over 6 months of coaching, and we're helping him focusing on what's right. How can we be more authentic in his leadership? And at the end of the year, the sales actually 10xed.
oh,
So yeah,
wow.
it grew 10 times. So focusing on strengths, it's not just a philosophy. When we actually go through the grind of just applying, sometimes it can feel cheesy, but if we continue to apply towards specific outcomes and aspirations, it can be quite amazing.
Mm. Yeah, and sometimes those outcomes can have well-being impact to them, right?
Yeah.
Teams can have I mean, we can actually start influencing people's lives, right?
Hmm.
You have any thoughts on that as it ties into this well-being component?
Yeah, it's well-being and satisfaction too. Even many of us, we know this, clues to talent, 5 clues to talent, and one of it is satisfaction. So there are certain things we get done. We work really hard, we grit through, and we get done. And then we're like, "Whew, I hope I never get to do that again." Versus when we know how to do things in a way that's aligned with our talents, it's actually fun. It's energizing to a level where we start like anticipating, oh, when can I do more of these?
Mhm.
It's definitely aligned. I think there's a lot of connection with well-being, and In some of my prior, um, talks, I also talked about not just top 5 Clifton strengths, but these are our top 5 batteries.
Mm,
And we
mhm,
want to make sure that these are charged, because when they are, it gives us purpose, meaning, and we feel good. We feel good about ourselves and what we do. Whereas, like I jokingly say about my 34th Achiever battery, like when that battery is charged, Jim, eh, like for me, it's like it doesn't do me much. But when that connectedness battery is charged, that developer battery is
yeah.
charged, that individualization battery is charged, then that just boosts me and gives me so much more energy
Mm,
than crossing something off the list.
yeah.
Yeah.
Does this charge you up at all? This medium, knowing you're getting to talk to so many different people and put some, connect some dots. Does this charge you up?
It does charge me, but I would say this activity alone, it could have charged me, it could have drained me too.
Mm,
Like if I didn't know my top 5 and I was focusing on, ooh, now I got to bring up a show and I got to do something. And if it was more like that, it would have been inauthentic.
mm,
If I tried to participate in a session like this, try to fake what's on the bottom.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm leaning in with my connectedness with my developer, and leaning in with more a sense of not accomplishment, but more with a sense of service. So then now it's meaningful and it is charging.
Yeah, I love it. These charge me up. High Ranger, high Maximizer. I
Yeah.
love 1,000 things going on all at the same time. Folks throwing questions in chat, trying to manage the questions back to you, trying to bring it all together. That, well, for some people, that's a lot of work. I actually leave these more
Mm,
charged than I came, which is, at first, I didn't quite understand it. People would be like, "How do you do so many?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And it's because they charge me up. And I think we can think about that from a teamwork perspective
mm,
too, of the teams identifying what charges me. And if you got a whole team that's getting charged every day, right?
yeah.
We really get to the conclusion. Danny Lee, thank you for, it's always great. Hard to get you because you're always traveling to some place in the world, but great to have you. Thanks for your wisdom. Thanks for your advice,
It
and
was a great pleasure.
appreciate you being here today. We'll remind everyone listening, we will make this available through the Clifton Strengths podcast. So if you haven't subscribed to that, head out to your podcast player and just search Clifton Strengths, and or the Clifton Strengths podcast, or Gallup. Either one of those will get you there, and we'll be posting this a little bit later. Lots of theme materials. In fact, we've been working through the Clifton Strengths for Leaders report in season 2. A
Mm.
lot of discussion of well-being in season 1, so a lot of great resources for you as well. To everyone watching live, thanks for coming out, and if you're listening on the podcast, thanks for listening. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.